by then, I was scrambling because my ECFMG wasn't ready, the certificate, when I submitted the ERAS form. I had a terrible step one score. I'm not ashamed to share, it's 208. And for many IMGs here will gasp, what, a 208 USMLE step one score? That was terrible. And why I got that score was because US was never my initial plan. And so it was just a backup plan. And when I was doing that, like high score wasn't in a priority. To me, it was just passing. And later, I really regretted that because when you want to go.
The IMG Roadmap is the only podcast dedicated to coaching international medical graduates in success blueprints for this unique pathway. I am Dr. Nina Loom, your host, a previous IMG turned hospital medicine physician, healthcare administrator, speaker, and coach. I empower, encourage, and equip you with actionable steps that you can take towards the residency position of your dreams. Hello, guys. Welcome to another episode of the IMG Roadmap podcast. It's the beginning of 2023. And here at the IMG Roadmap, we're dedicated to your success. One of the key areas where IMG journeys or USMLE journeys and all these different colloquialisms that we've adopted to describe this path that we're on is research. And today's guest is a specialist in that. So I have with me here Dr. Jia Ng. She is just, amazing. I was going through her pages and I'll give you all her URLs before we're done with today. And I'm like, where has she been all my IMG online internet life? Because she has all the pertinent information that you guys sent me questions about when it comes to research. So Dr. Jia is a board certified nephrologist. She's an assistant professor at Zucker School of Medicine at Hofstra/Northwell. She's the founder of Published MD, and she coaches clinicians on how to build their authority and achieve their academic goal. So she's also an IMG, and I would let you listen to her tell us more about her IMG journey and what makes her an IMG. Welcome to the podcast, Dr. Jia. We're so excited to have you today. How are you doing?
I'm good. Thank you so much, Dr. Loom.
It's my pleasure to have you. But everyone on the podcast usually wants to know right off the bat, like, why are you an IMG? What makes you an IMG? So give us the juicy details of your background.
Okay. So I am born in Malaysia and I did my medical school. It was a twinning program, half in Royal College of Surgeons, Ireland, and half in Malaysia. And I finished off my clinical training in Malaysia because the point was to train us there and then to do internship and become a doctor there. And then halfway throughout my clinical year, I realized that the opportunity in Malaysia wasn't that much. So it takes years to get to the consulting, being a consultant. And so I started thinking about different places to go. Singapore, Australia, and the US was actually the bottom of the list. Nobody talks about US and Malaysia. We all go to Australia. And so then it started my journey, did my exam, really worked through my internship and residency in Malaysia. Every cent of my money was spent on either doing exam or taking flight to the US to do CS exam and for observership. So that was kind of my journey from being a IMG, then coming to residency, and then eventually matching into internal medicine residency program.
Wow. So yes, in many ways, you are an IMG. You've experienced all those things that we know about. The excessive amount of money that we have to spend to travel to the United States to do a free observership where we don't get paid for it, right? Just so we can
sometimes we have to pay.
And we have to pay them, right?
Yeah.
To get the experience, right? And then having this kind of joint training in two different countries. It sounds like you started off at Penang Medical College and then went to Royal College of Surgeons in Ireland. You spent 2.5 years in Ireland and then in Malaysia. So you have this like maybe tri-coastal life. You've been in Malaysia and Ireland and now in the United States. But talk to us about your journey into residency. I know you did tell me in your pre-intake form that you did not match the first time. So walk us through what that process was like. Give us the years, the dates, and what was going on.
Okay, so some juicy details. But I graduated in 2008. And the time I first applied for residency was 2011 or maybe 2010. Yeah, because it takes a year. And by then, I was scrambling because my ECFMG wasn't ready, the certificate, when I submitted the ERAS form. I had a terrible step one score. I'm not ashamed to share, it's 208. And for many IMGs here will gasp, what, a 208 USMLE step one score? That was terrible. And why I got that score was because US was never my initial plan. And so it was just a backup plan. And when I was doing that, like high score wasn't in a priority. To me, it was just passing. And later, I really regretted that because when you want to go somewhere, you need to put full energy into something. Then you can get to the right path, not half, put one foot here, put another foot there. So that's not the right path. So learn from my mistake. So after that, because of all these poor scores and not having ESFMG certified, I did not match. Almost wanted to give up. But my husband actually encouraged me, you're so close. Why not try another year? Because I was really upset about this. And as you know, IMGs, we spend so much money going back and forth. Right. So I tried one more year. This time I did another additional observership. I recovered by doing really well in my step 2 and step 3 scores. And I think I wrote a good application. My personal statement was a lot better, had more personality in it, really show the weakness I had. I used my experience and brought that up as a special feature rather than a weakness. So I think that pushed me towards matching the second time. Actually, you know what? I did not match. I took a pre-match.
Wow, even better. So you at least were able to skip some of the anxiety of not having to wait for the match.
Absolutely. And I took it because at that time, that program was willing to do H-1B visa first. Mm-hmm. And second, they said there were 2 residents they were working on H-1, their green card. They did not proceed with that eventually because there was a change in management. But at that time, to me, it was a big path towards getting into the US with the right type of visa.
Right. So you are now a practicing nephrologist, and before you became a nephrologist, obviously had to complete an internal medicine residency, which for our listeners, you can be a nephrologist either by doing an internal medicine residency or a pediatrics residency and then specializing in pediatric nephrology. But either way, just kind of painting the picture for our listeners here, but you didn't have a perfect story. You started off with a low step 1 score in many ways, as you described, 208, did not get your first attempt at matching after giving yourself a year or 2 to prepare. And then your second go around really is where you're able to accept this pre-match offer that was willing to also work with you on an H visa. And for those who are listening, the H-1B is the work visa. The J-1 is the student exchange visitor visa. And H-1B offers maybe a shorter pathway to a green card. So let's go back into that part of your life and let's just dissect what that meant for you when you got that low step 1 score. Did you ever think that becoming this physician, clinician, researcher that you are now, that is trusted by all these different medical schools? I was looking through your website, and you have been vetted and you've done research work in front of major medical institutions. And so, how do we go from reconciling that person and that IMG who starts off with the 208 and now is a clinician researcher? Like, walk us through some of the things that you would say made you who you are.
Great question. We tend to hold on to our past and keep tabs of all the losses from our past. But actually, what people really look at is what you're doing with that currently. And each path of the way, each step, you just need to move the step forward. It doesn't have to be the best step. It just has to be forward. And so despite getting made a community program, not Ivy League program, that was my first step. You just need to get your foot in the door. So that was my mindset. Let me get in first. And during residency, I told myself I'm never going to get into that position. And so I worked really hard. And I was resident of the year for all 3 years, intern of the year, resident of the year, year 2, resident of the year 3. And then I was chosen as the chief resident. And so because of all these, despite my poor step 1 score, I was able to match into my top fellowship program in University of Pennsylvania. And that was top within nephrology. And so sometimes we like to think about just because of one bad score, it means our future is over. But it's really not. When we, as an attending now, even when I interview people, I look at how they take the adversity and how they crawl back up, how they rise up despite the poor score. That is what I want to see in a resident. That's what I want to see in a fellow. My message mainly is just take a step, then you move forward, and then you never take your previous mistakes and hold on to them. Take that as a lesson and move forward.
Right. I agree. Definitely using what we think are negatives to propel us forward, because really at the end of the day, we still have a whole life ahead of us, and we can't pigeonhole ourselves into what we consider the failures of the moment and hope that would describe the rest of our lives, because that is just a lie that we are believing based on what we think is our current reality. And I definitely, because a lot of times it's easy for me now to sit back and say, oh, wow, you can do it, guys, like keep going. But the reason that it's easy for me to do that is because when I was going through the trenches, I had a certain level of hope to look forward to. And our audience right now is going to be listening to this in the month of January, 2023. And it's usually that time of the year where everyone is thinking about all the things they can do differently. And I want you to hear Dr. Jia's story as a motivational story that you can take with you to say, even though I feel right now like how she could have felt coming out of the USMLE Step 1 without a great score or not matching the first time, I just need time and effort and action so that I can get myself to be that person that gets to claim a different future. And that is so important, guys. As you're listening to us today, I want you to make sure you take that to heart. So Dr. Jia, walk us through, so you finished residency and then got into fellowship at UPenn, which is pretty dang good. So what was that like for you, especially as a J1 as a visa applicant? How did you land such a competitive fellowship opportunity?
Okay. Actually, at that time, I went from H1 to green card right before I got my fellowship. So to give a little bit background about visa, which I think will be useful for some of your listeners, I got H1. My spouse came with H4, so he could not work for a year. And so we were living on a one-person salary. And second year, he managed to find an IT job. And so he got his own H1. And then his employer gave him a green card, and I got a green card. So for me, by chance and by luck, I also got a green card. But sometimes we have to think about our spouses. Can they get green card from their side? We don't have to hold everything ourselves. If we have a spouse, we have a partner, we can think about a strategy. Can we do this together? How can we optimize our visa status? So that was my visa situation. And having having permanent residence helped a lot in terms of my position in UPenn, because I specifically wanted a research position, because to get into research, a true researcher in the US typically needs NIH funding, and they only give it to, if you apply, it's only available for people with green card or citizen. And so they considered that when it came to choosing whether I was going to a clinical fellowship or a research fellowship track. And I wanted to do research at that time, and green card really opened the door for my career in terms of the research trajectory.
Yeah. So you started off with an H1, and then through your spouse, and like you're saying, strategized with your family and who you moved to the States with, particularly, so that you can see if you can't get it early, can that person get it first? And by virtue, you obtain that status. So you're saying through that process, you were already doing research, or how did the research come to the picture?
Oh, right. Research, I was trained in Malaysia, so it's fully clinical, no research at all. During residency, it's a community program. But it was a very special program, Crozier Chester Medical Center, where they did a lot of quality improvement project, where each year, first, second, and third year, we was split into groups. And there will be 2 projects led by the second year. And so every year, we will always get 2 projects out. It may not be the best research project, but it's quality improvement project. We could get into an abstract in a conference, but not a full paper. But it was the whole idea of let's come up with an idea, let's do data collection, even though it's messy. Let us try to submit something to a conference and to see our name, even in an abstract in the paper, feeling proud about it. That was what triggered it, and that was the catalyst to research, like asking questions. How can we solve clinical problems? How can we solve research problems? And I love doing that. And finally, it's the impact. While I love one-to-one patient care, I can only help one at a time. And I believe research, even though indirectly, I can help one to many, 1 to 1,000. And you never know which research is going to change. It's all incremental step, but I believe if I trace it all the way through, all the different projects have led to a difference in patients' life in a bigger impact.
Right. Yeah, I agree 100%. I feel like when we answer a research question, we are offering a solution to a majority of people beyond what you can do for just one patient. I definitely look at that perspective as well. So let's talk about you mentioned to me earlier as well that beyond just the step 1 score being low, you felt like not having your ECFMG certificate maybe also played a role the first time you applied. Do you want to share a little bit on that?
Right. What I've learned through the whole process twice, right? The matching process twice is you have to be very organized. And sometimes when we are in medical school, our life has been dictated for us. It's so structured, everything is decided for us. And then when it comes to matching, suddenly you become an adult and we forget that. And so you have to plan your milestones, your deadline properly. And as somebody who just finished, I was all over the place. I did not get my things ready. I had paperwork that wasn't ready. So that was the cost. That's the cost I had to pay because paperwork wasn't ready. So my certification wasn't ready. And my message to people is when you want to be serious about things, you have to treat yourself and start acting like an adult, not like what I did, and reverse engineer. When is the deadline? Give a buffer zone. How long does it take for all the different paperwork to be ready, and start early?
I agree 100%. I do agree. So as far as other IMGs who are going through this process, one of the questions that I get often is, what can I do differently? How can I make myself competitive? How can I improve my application? And one of the things that comes as a sort of de facto response when an IMG asks that question is do research, right? So what are your thoughts on that as a whole?
I feel like research, if you come as an IMG with no research background, I think taking a year off just to do research is not as meaningful as having clinical observership. Because in residency program, what they want is they want to know the real you, and they want to get a resident who is competent when they come in the first year. That is why the observership is important. And being somebody who has done internship in Malaysia and also in the US, I thought I was ready. I thought I knew everything. And I thought I would start, because I was doing internship the second time, I thought it would be so easy. It would be a piece of cake, but it was so hard because it was completely different. And then that I believe is why residency program director cares so much about the clinical observership. They want you to know this is a different system, not what you had back home. And research, yeah, it may be a piece of maybe cherry on top, but I think the clinical observership is really more meaningful.
So in your opinion, if a student is faced with the decision of, hey, should I do an observership for 1 month? Or if they're coming to the States from another country, or they have 2 opportunities, are you saying you would recommend that they focus on the clinical observership? And if so, what kind of observership are you referring to? Or should they try to do even some amount of basic, clinical research or case reports, or do you even consider those research?
Yeah, case reports, definitely. You can do case report because you are seeing a lot of patients. You may be seeing a lot of patients and you can write something up. So that is doable. But to say stop your life and take a whole year off to do research, and I think the first 2 years of research learning you may not publish that much. And so you may finish the whole thing and don't have anything to show for, unless you are lucky and get to a lab that is already churning out papers and you manage to get stuck into one. But otherwise, if you're starting a new project, you are not getting a paper out in about 1.5 or 2 years. And so it's not really going to help your match. You can help in your life, but not for match. And then going back to your other question, so basically I would choose clinical observership first. And the type, one that has many patient touch points. So if you want to do internal medicine, go for internal medicine. Don't go randomly join a clinic where they are doing ophthalmology. You don't see that many patients and you don't get to see how the hospital is like. I think hospital medicine would be more, you get to see more cases and more people and experience the life of the American healthcare a little bit more.
I agree. I think that we should tailor our experiences to the specialty that we're interested in the best we can. Because if you don't do that, you may be missing out on networking opportunities, on learning about your specialty of interest and other ways that you can improve yourself toward that application, even just by being in another office. So if you're in an ophthalmology office, but you're looking at internal medicine, well, you're not meeting internists every day. You're not speaking to internists every day. You're not interacting and networking with internists. You're not getting LORs from internists. So tailoring the observership to the specialty that you're applying to, it makes a big difference. And as well with research, like if you're in an inpatient setting, you're likely to pick up a case that you can potentially write a report on and vice versa. So I definitely agree with that reference and recommendation as well. So
absolutely. I have one more thing to add is when you mentioned about letters of recommendation, that is the key. You'd be surprised when we look at application. The first thing I usually look is the letter of recommendation. Is it very generic, like as if they don't know you, or are they raving about how good you are, how you try to ask questions, how you bring things to the table, how you say maybe you take initiative, you want to see patients. These are the things that we want to see because we want a resident or a fellow who takes initiative. So we want to see that coming out of the letter. And looking at scores doesn't differentiate you. It is all these letters that make you different.
Right. Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. That really does. And so now let's talk about your career as an academic physician, because you did mention what you look at when it comes to application. So what are some recommendation and advice that you have, therefore, for IMGs who are applying in this day and age in 2023?
So there are a few skills that you need to build. One is understand that research skill is very different from medicine skill. So people who feel frustrated and find it difficult, it is difficult because you haven't learned it before. And don't give up too quickly just because it feels boring at the moment. And usually things don't feel nice when you are not good at it and you don't know anything about it. And so you may have to try a few projects, do a few quality improvement projects, really understand how people come up with a question and getting the soul of research. Then writing paper, that takes time too. So it is a skill that needs to be built and you need some patience. Sometimes it takes 2 or 3 years to even get the foundation right. That's why I did a master's in clinical epidemiology to understand how to read a paper properly, how research questions are formed, all the different study methods. And so if research is something that you want to consider, don't just think that I am going to wing it. Usually you can't wing it because if you don't have the foundation in terms of the right study method and what the research question is, everything will go downhill after that, because you're going to write the wrong type of paper, you're going to write the wrong method, and all the work you've done over 2 years is going to get into a rejection pile, and you don't want to waste time doing that. So get the right skill. If you don't have any mentor to teach you, that's why I put up YouTube videos to give some basic foundation. Okay, this is how you read a paper. This is how you write a paper. This is some terms you need to know in a research paper. That is to help clinicians who are never exposed, no mentors to guide them. But if you want, you should also think about Coursera. There are some statistical courses. There are some courses on study methods. I do also provide courses, but if you want to start free, you can definitely go for Coursera first. At least gain some basic foundation, then you can start working on research.
I agree 100% with you on that. And so as far as IMGs that are looking to apply into, for example, internal medicine residency or primary care, whether that's family medicine, peds, or be really just any residency, and maybe they're already on a pathway to say, hey, I'm going to try to present at a conference. I'm going to try to have a poster presentation. Maybe it's a small case report or a small literature review. Do you find those to be helpful in their application process?
Yes. I would say case report is a nice middle zone where it does not require you because it's medicine. Medicine. And the only skill you need to learn now is how to frame it as a key learning point. What is special about this case? And then another thing you're learning is navigating the publication process. So you're only learning 2 new things, and it's not as overwhelming instead of a whole cohort study. So that's a good middle point. Literature review or a narrative review paper, you can do it, but I do want to mention one mistake people do. Review papers are usually invited only. So you don't waste time writing this review paper, spend months and months and months doing it, and then you submit it to the journal and nobody asks you for it. And so they will reject it. What you want to do instead is you can email the editor and say, hey, I have this topic that's interesting and I want to write about it and why it's new, why it is good for the readership. Then they say, okay, this looks interesting. Then I'll give you an official invite. So do that extra step so that you are not wasting months and months of work and then have nothing to show for.
Right. No, I agree with you on that because, you could pick something because you think it sounds good and you have no idea how much work and dedication that it requires and really who's going to accept it and who's going to publish it. And so erring on the side of clinical cases, I find to be easily acceptable because there is room on most about every conference to receive such reports from medical students. And so that's always an easy sort of starting point. And I like that you touched on it. So let's talk about your work in research. I was reading something, I found a post of yours, and you mentioned that you had 0 publications after graduating from a Master's of Science in Clinical Epidemiology, and then you did something different. Within 3 years, you published 18 papers and received close to $1 million of research funding. What changed? Like how? What happened?
Oh man, it was such a painful time, when you finish and you have 0 publication. It was embarrassing. It's almost like you finish medical school and say, I'm not competent enough to be a doctor. I can't see patient. To me, it felt that way. And I had trouble finding a research position. Most only wanted full clinical, 100%. You see patient 24 weeks of the time, and then you see clinic every day. I did not want that. I want something where I can have space to think. And the reason I did not publish was because there were several things. One, I did not know that we need to tell story of data, because all we think about research is, we just need data. Data is objective, but actually data is not objective. You need to pull story out of the data. What are you trying to solve? What is the question you're trying to answer? Before I could get that, I was unable to publish. So that was one issue. Second issue was I went from clinical to research, not realizing that in research, you have to be very proactive. It's non-structured. And suddenly when you go from every day you see patients, you show up in a hospital and patients come to you, to now you have 75% of free time and you don't know what to do with yourself. And so I was wasting a lot of time twiddling my thumbs, checking my inbox, checking my Epic, calling patients and spending 30 minutes to chat with a patient, where what I should be doing is planning on my research, create a research pipeline, like a production line, start talking to collaborators, thinking about ideas, how to make sure I achieve my milestone. And in research, there's a lot of thinking and planning ahead because that's waiting. Every time you submit something, it takes 3 months to come back. You submit something to the ethics committee or IRB board, it takes 3 months to come back. And I did not publish also because I was only doing one project. And each time I wait for 3 months and I had nothing to do. Then I waited for another 3 months and I had nothing to do. What I should have been doing is stacking different projects at different phases. And so that was the shift, changing from a reactive to proactive, planning up all the milestones and stacking projects. And also because this time I felt like when I got this position, I felt like I need to show that it's worth investing in me, because my division chief, they took somebody with zero publication. Somehow they saw something in me. They took me in, and I'm not going to waste this opportunity, and I'm going to prove them right. I'm going to prove that they made the right decision. And also, I was getting philanthropic funds from people who, general public people who wants to donate to the scientific community, and I was one of the lucky recipients of that. And so I want to make sure that they put their faith in me, their money in me. I want to make sure I give that the return on the investment.
Right. You wanted to make it worthwhile. I love it. Yeah. So let's, thank you for coming on and really kind of giving us insight as to, one, your journey as an IMG from Malaysia to Ireland to the United States, and even into fellowship and through your visa hurdles, and really sharing a little bit with us about a lot of the work that you're doing now, which is really centered around being a clinician researcher and being also a faculty member at a US medical institution. So you definitely have a lot of insight. And I know that this will not be the end of our conversation together, because I'm hoping to have you back, especially after we hear back from our listeners on this episode and see what all they may want to hear about for the future. So I really appreciate you coming on. But before we let you go, looking back at the journey to where you're at right now, what advice would you give yourself, just looking back at your entire process?
2 advice. One is, you never know what your failures might bring. So not matching the first time meant that I matched in a second position where I had an H1 visa. And that also meant that I was in a program that did a lot of quality improvement project that triggered my love for research. And that's how I came to this trajectory. And so never take what is adversity as the end of the life, but sometimes it could be a seed for something even bigger. So that is my first reflection. The second thing is, never waste an opportunity. Sometimes we get a second chance. I feel like I've gotten so many second chances. My second chance in residency, in matching into residency, and I told myself, I am going to be the best. And then a second chance when I got into my faculty position with zero publication, I said, I'm going to be the best. And so never waste a second chance.
Right. I love it. Adversity can really position us for a greater future if we just allow for the time to pass and allow for us to go through that process, whatever that may look like for us. It's almost like allowing that stressful season to come to a completion, right? And indeed, when we are given opportunity, take it and run with it. Do everything that you can in your power. Show up and show out. Let people see that you are not taking this for granted. And then they can see your work ethic through that, the way you show up, the way you carry yourself. People do recognize these things. And those are the traits that end up translating into your letters of recommendations, into people calling up other programs and faculty on your behalf is because they see you go above and beyond and not take any opportunity for granted. So I really 100% resonate with your pearls of advice that you've given us today. Is there a special mantra, or is that your mantra?
I don't have a special mantra. I always have little quotes I learned from other books, and I hold them dearly. So these two are ones that at this moment really resonate with me.
Yeah. Now, how can an IMG connect with you if they want to learn more about what you're sharing with clinicians and researchers or aspiring researchers or people who have an inclination to want to learn more? How can they connect with you?
So easiest way I would say is through Twitter, because there is a DM feature. So it's at JIAHWEING. So that is to connect. For resource, I do a lot of writing tips, how the doctors round, how to round efficiently, how to understand research concept. That is on my YouTube channel at Published MD.
All right. So guys, we're going to have Dr. Jia's information, her Twitter handle, her website information, her YouTube, her Instagram information, all of that would be in the chat, so that in the show notes below. And that way you can click and access her information. I think her YouTube page is just an abundance of resources. And looking through her videos, I was like, we should do a video together for YouTube, because I also have a YouTube page as well. And I think our audiences could definitely relate with one another. So yeah, I'll put all this in the show notes, guys, so you can do a one click and you find her page, which I believe has just a lot of helpful information.
Thank you so much, Dr. Loom. It's such a pleasure talking to you.
Same, the pleasure is mine. Thanks for coming on the podcast.
All right, thank you. Take care.